handmade dumplings. So you're going to make the dough and make the filling, roll it out, and make these little fabulous dumplings. So we've made them all from scratch from things that you've just got at home. So let's get cooking.
Beautiful. All right, let's have a look at our recipe here. Fantastic. So now what we're doing here is we're checking off that we've got the ingredients. We don't need to worry about the amounts at this stage or the volumes. All we're doing here is checking that we've got everything on our workspace. Now, you will notice that I always have my, oops, my daisy making mess, noise. I'll always have my ingredients on one side of my workbench, and I always have my equipment on the other side of my workbench. The reason I do that, and you can put it anywhere, there's no right or wrong way, but it just makes it really easy. So when I'm looking for an ingredient, even if I've lost it, like I've lost a little piece of garlic, I know that it's not going to be all over the rest of my kitchen. I know that it's going to be in my ingredients spot. So, excellent. So, you're going to need some plain flour. Is it easy? I've got my plain flour here. And remember, all you're doing here is just checking that you've got everything. You'll need some salt. Got my salt. You'll need some warm water. Well, obviously in your tap, you've got warm water. Then for your filling, you've got some mince. I've got chicken mince. You might have some prawns if you're using prawns, or if you want to do vegetables instead, you can do vegetables. I've just got some cabbage there. You could use, not you could use, but that's another thing that another ingredient you could use. You'll need some ginger. You'll need a couple of shallots. Got some shallots out of the dregs of my vegetable crisper. You'll need some light soy sauce. And if you haven't got light soy sauce, you've just got regular soy sauce, that is absolutely fine. You'll need some Chinese cooking wine, or if you've got a little bit of rice wine vinegar, you can use that. Extra salt and some beautiful sesame oil. If you don't have sesame oil, that's fine and dandy. Great. I don't know why I've got garlic out. I grabbed it, don't need it. Excellent. Now, in terms of equipment, you're going to need measuring spoons. I've got my measuring spoons here. You'll need a couple of bowls. Got big size bowls there. A masher or a metal fork. A masher or a metal fork. A rolling pin. A knife. So I've got my little Victorinox knife that I use every single day of my life. Another small bowl. A container, like it says here, a container with a lid or a large plate. So when we make our dumplings, you're going to have to pop them somewhere. I've just got a plate like this. You can just use a dinner plate or even a baking tray with some baking paper on top. A large saucepan or a fry pan. So I've got this here because I'm going to make pot stickers. A slotted spoon and a baking tray or a serving dish. Beautiful. Excellent. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make our flour. We're going to make our dough. Then we need it to rest for a little while. And then we're going to make our filling. We'll come back to our dough and then we'll make our dumplings. Fantastic. All right. Any questions before we start? Quiet. I love it. All right. Feel free to ask questions because your question will be somebody else's answer. So excellent. So the first thing that we're going to do is grab your mixing bowl. Grab your mixing bowl and you'll need measuring cup. Mixing bowl and a measuring cup. You're going to measure out 4 cups of plain flour. 4 cups of plain flour. Now, this is going to make a lot of dumpling dough, but I'd rather you have more dough than not enough. So 4 cups of plain flour. And you'll see that I never measure over the top of the bowl so that we don't have accidental spillages. 1. 2. 3. Now, don't put your flour away because you're going to need it at the end when we start rolling things out. Great. 4. Oh, my goodness me. All right, 2 teaspoons of salt. 2 teaspoons of salt because we want our dough to have a nice amount of flavour. 2 teaspoons of salt. Double check that you've definitely got the right measurement. And you'll see that I never measure over the bowl. So I'm using the table as a kind of extra hand. So I'm resting the spoon on there. And sprinkling my beautiful. Excellent. So 4 cups of plain flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 1 1/4 cups of warm water. Now, when I say warm, I want quite hot, not boiling hot, but you definitely won't want to put your finger in. So 1 1/4 cups of warm to hot water. So again, I'm just measuring at the side and let the measuring cup just be, I let the measuring cup just rest on my workbench so I'm not trying to hold it up in the air and pour warm water. Perfect. And then once you've done that, then you can start adding or mixing your ingredients together. Now, you might have seen on YouTube videos how some people do this with what do you call them? Chopsticks. So I was watching a video on Instagram before and they were making dumplings and they were using chopsticks. So it doesn't really matter what kind of utensil you use. But you'll find in a moment that your dough is going to come together quite as like, it's called rags. So we're just going to mix it as much as you can. Our dough will start coming together. If your dough is still too dry, you can start adding like a tablespoon at a time of extra water. Tablespoon at a time. Don't add 1/4 cup. You just want tablespoon. I think mine just needs a little bit of extra, so I'm going to add a little bit extra. It's always a little bit at a time. Otherwise, you'll go to the other degree and then you'll end up having to add more flour. So now when I need, and there's no wrong way, but this is just what I do, is I only use one hand. And the reason I only use one hand is then I've got a clean hand and a dirty hand. So I just use my writing hand and I just find that it's easier. And that's my strongest hand as well. So I can get my hand right in and I've still got a clean hand to turn the tap on or open a cupboard or grab a utensil. Fantastic. I think I'm done. So if you put your finger into your dough and it slowly sort of comes out, you can still see that I've got, I'll do it again. So I've got my dough And if I put my finger in, it starts to sort of slowly concave back in again. Not completely, so you can still see that there's an indentation, but that the dough starts to react. So if you pull your dough a little bit, please don't pull it because you're keeping it together, but you'll find that it's a little bit sort of, you can almost see those little elasticy strands. Great. All right. I'm going to put my dough in a nice little round as much as I can. And then I'm going to pop it back into my mixing bowl. Pop it back into my mixing bowl. Whew. And then we're going to rest our dough. So you can cover it with a tea towel if you want and go and put it, I'm just going to put it in the back here. And when you're ready, you can add, so the recipe says 200 grams of mince. I'm not using prawns, so I'm going to add all of my mince to my bowl. But if you want to add 200 grams of your mince, and if you're using prawns, I want you to add 200 grams of your prawns. So your prawns will need to be chopped. And then if you want to grab a metal fork or a masher, just going to break your meat up. Just break your meat up so it's, and particularly if you're using your prawns, you just want to, ooh, I've got food all over me. It's not good. You're wanting to incorporate your prawns and your mince. So just use your fork or a masher just to gently mash your prawn flesh and mix it together with your chicken or pork or whatever you're going to use. So once you've got your meat together, what we're going to do is add 1 tablespoon of ginger. So if you've got minced ginger like me, we're going to do 1 tablespoon of ginger. If you've got fresh ginger, you want to grate that with your grater so that it's all broken down, and it's probably about 5 centimetres of fresh ginger. So 1 tablespoon of ginger. And this is like, the ginger gives our filling so much flavour. Smell the ginger before you pop it in. I love the smell of ginger. It's beautiful. So if you're grating it, you want to use quite a small grater. You don't want big chunky bits of ginger. So we've got 1 tablespoon of ginger. 1 tablespoon of ginger. And then we're going to add 2 shallots or 2 spring onions. Now, spring onions are a funny vegetable because sometimes you'll get massive, big, chunky ones, or you'll get tiny, tiny, thin ones. So I'm going to choose 2 average-looking shallots, and I'm going to cut them up really nice and finely. So we don't want, when we bite into our shallot, to get a big chunky piece of shallot. So sometimes when we do a stir fry, I'll say, cut up a nice big piece of shallot. But for this guy, we want really nice and thin pieces. So very finely. Now, as I like to do, if there's a quick way of doing something, I will chop it in half so there's less cutting. Take your time with your cutting. You don't want to end up with your finger chopped. And as you'll hear me say, there's no Olympic sport for cooking. So So we don't want to chop our fingers off. Just want to take your time on top of your filling ingredients. Beautiful. All right, fantastic. So now we're going to add our sauces. So we've got 1 tablespoon of light soy sauce. And as I said before, it doesn't matter if you have got different kinds of soy sauces. There is literally dark soy sauce, light soy sauce, gluten-free soy sauce, all sorts of different kinds that they use. You've got sweet, like you've got ketchup mousse. So here is a sweet soy sauce, which is really yummy. But we don't want to have 5 billion different kinds of sauces in our pantry. So we just use what we've got. So 1 tablespoon of light soy sauce. Beautiful. 1 tablespoon of light soy sauce. One tablespoon of light soy sauce, and then you're going to do 2 tablespoons of Chinese cooking wine. If you've got rice wine vinegar, just do 1 tablespoon. So if you've got rice wine vinegar, just do 1 tablespoon. Measure over the top. Great. And then we've got 1/2 teaspoon of salt. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I know you've put, we've put soy sauce, but I always find that it just needs a little bit of extra flavour. So I put 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Sprinkle that on top of your filling. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Beautiful. Great. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. Have a smell of the sesame oil if you've never used it before. It's a really strong flavour, but you're not going to eat it on its own. You use it in, it's a flavouring. So, okay, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Then just take your time to make sure that all of the lids on your sauces are done up. So if you accidentally knock something, they're not going to end up all over the counter. We had a boy in a class one time and he didn't put the lid on the red food dye, and so he just knocked it and it just went all over his mum's stone bench top. So not good. All right, so once you've got your sesame oil in, then you're going to start mixing all of your flavourings and ingredients all in together. So you're wanting a nice smooth consistency, and you'll start to see that the ingredients are evenly incorporated and there's no little sort of pink patches of meat. Just take the time to sort of squash your meat into the sides of the bowl so that it's breaking up nicely, and then all of those beautiful flavourings are incorporated together. It's probably just about a minute's worth of mixing. You can use your spatula or you just use your metal fork is fine. All right, so you want to grab your dough. Oops, Daisy. Oh, how good does that feel? And we're going to divide our dough into 4 pieces. 4 pieces. chop it into 4. Oh, this feels amazing. You want to put the other 3 pieces into your back into your mixing bowl. So you're cutting it into 4 pieces. I've got my 1 piece here that we're about to use, and then we're putting the other 3 back into the mixing bowl. Mine is definitely starting to dry out, so I'm going to just cover it. Excellent. Just don't want it to dry out. And then I'm going to sprinkle my board with some flour. Sprinkle the board with some flour, and then we'll just give your little piece of dough just a little bit of a knead so it's nice and round again. So you're going to sprinkle your board with flour, not too much. Yeah, beautiful, just sprinkling it. Excellent, because we don't want our dough to dry out. Fantastic. And then I'm just rolling my rolling pin and covering it with a little bit of flour. Excellent. All right, then it's operation rollout. So when I roll out, roll it this way, and then immediately I'm going to turn it. Roll it out this way, and then immediately turn it. And this, in theory, will stop you getting a piece of dough that looks like the shape of Australia. So, and it also stops your dough from just, it helps you know how sticky your dough is. So I'm rolling it out and turning it. Excellent. Now, so then what I'm going to do is I've got myself a round cutter. Now your round cutter, if you don't, I've got a cake decorating round cutter. You might have a scone cutter. You might want to use like a glass jar that you use the shape, but test it. So you just, because remember you're going, I'll just give you an example. So I'm going to chop, I'm just going to test one. I mean, I know that this one works. And the one that I'm using is it's called a 78 mil. So I want to be able to lay my dumpling wrapper in my hand like that. It needs to be at least the size of your palm. Otherwise, when you fold it over and sort of play around with it, it might end up being too small. Great. And then once you've made it, you can just put them at the side. Can't see that one. Let's put that there. So I'm cutting mine out. And if you've used fresh mince, not anything that's been frozen, like if your prawns were frozen, then you can't do this. But what you can do is you can make up a bulk amount of dumplings and then freeze them. So that, say, during the week, if you want to just have a quick dinner, then so I've got a little bowl like this. And I'm going to fill it up with some water. Just cold water. I'm going to move that out of the way. Excellent. All right, so I've got my round. I'll do this with all of mine. I've got about 15 rounds. So if you missed this one, I'm just going to keep going. So I'm going to get my finger and I'm just dipping my finger and doing a half moon around my pastry. Now remember, you don't want to be putting your fingers near your mouth during this time because you're going to be working with raw meat. So I'm getting about a teaspoon of filling. Got a teaspoon of filling. Then I'm going to fold it up. Oops, maybe that was a bit too much. A bit generous there. And then I'm sealing up my little dumpling. Now, I used a bit too much dough. And the first couple that you do is going to, you just test it. You test how much filling you need. Great. All right. Then I hold my fingers like this and I'm using my little crab pinchers to make a Z on top. So like a Z, and then I squeeze them together. Beautiful. This is not a very good example. Beautiful. Actually, it's a really bad example, guys. Do another one. That's better. That's better. You can see how big my it's covering the palm of my hand. So what I've done is I've cut out my little round and then I've used my rolling pin just to make it a little bit bigger. All right, here we go. Then I put my teaspoon of filling in and I'm wetting the edges in half. Oh, much better, much better. Okay, and then I've got my two little pincher fingers making a Z on top. Can you see the Z that I've got? Pushing the Z top and the bottom together. And then I make two more. There are all sorts of different ways you can make dumpling shapes. So that's just the classic one. And the reason they fold it is to make sure that it doesn't come apart when it cooks. So I've got my little round and I am going to flatten it a little bit more because my ones are just a bit small. Then I've got it covering my hand. Teaspoon of filling, wet the edges, and then I seal it in the half moon, making sure there's no little air bubbles in it. Now this just takes practice. And you can do it from one end. I've seen people do that from one end. Some of the girls on my team are amazing and they can do it and make it look really fancy. Great. Great. And of course you can do the little money bag where you, all right, fantastic. So what I've got now is I'm going to show you how to make pot stickers. So pot stickers are different than when you steam the dumplings. So if you've got a steamer at home and you want to steam your dumplings, fantastic. But these are the fried version. So I've got a lid that I'm going to use for my fry pan. I've got some oil here and I've also got some water because you're going to add some water. And I'm going to use my tongs as well. So you'll need a plate to put them on once you've cooked them. Great, fantastic. So I'm going to fry them over a medium heat. And I'm going to add a tablespoon of oil. I'm going to add a tablespoon of oil, medium heat. Because we don't want to burn the bottom of our pot stickers. We only want to fry them with a nice, get a nice little golden bottom. Fantastic. So I'm going to use one of my pot stickers just as a test to make sure that my pan is hot enough. So don't let me rush you. I'm just showing you so that at any point you want to jump out of the class and finish, you can do that, and then you can finish doing everything else on your own. So if you're going to steam, that's another way of doing it as well. If you've got a steamer at home, then I'm not going to show you how to steam because I'm showing you how to do pot stickers. Great. So I've got a tablespoon of oil and I've got my pan over a medium heat. And I think that's ready to go. So I'm going to add a few more of my beautiful. And remember, you've got raw meat, so please be careful that you've got a clean plate to put your pot stickers on at the end. You don't want to use the same plate that your pot stickers were on before. Okay, great. Excellent. I think they're ready for me to add water to now. So a nice golden bottom, and they got crispy on the bottom and steamed on the top. So this is going to make a lot of steam. So I've got my lid ready to go. Pour my water in, and immediately I'm putting the lid on. And that steam is going to cook our beautiful pot stickers all the way through. So we're going to cook them for about 5 minutes. We're going to cook the dough. We're steaming the dough, steaming the meat all the way through. So the recipe says about 5 minutes to steam them. Pot stickers, pour half a cup of water, cook for 5 minutes until the dough is tender. Others while I'm waiting here for that. I'm going to check mine. Oh, so good. So you can see I've got nice and golden underneath and on top. Oh, yum-o. Yum, 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 so good. And then what will happen is when you take them out of the pan and onto a fresh plate, which I will do right now. And when you do cook them, you want to cook them when you're totally ready to serve. Ah, so yummy. It's a nice little golden underbottoms. Yum. That one's probably a little bit too brown. It's all about getting the timing for adding the water. You don't want to wait. You don't want to fry them for too long. Oh, yummo. So mine are perfect, ready to go.